Welcome to the Hockey Writers Fantasy Forecheck, where we talk to you about all things fantasy, keeper league, redraft, and dynasty. We're going to give you hot players to pick up, prospects on the rise, sleepers you should or shouldn't think of acquiring, and prospects who are looking to break out at the NHL level. I'm your host, Caleb Kerney.
And I'm also Jacob Strozyk.
Today we are going through our Metro Division recap. Jacob and I, just like last week, will go back and forth and give our best fantasy performer and our biggest fantasy surprise, positive or negative. So Jacob is going to kick things off with the top team in this division. Jacob, take it away.
Yeah, we'll start with Carolina, and I'm going to go with Andrei Svechnikov. Before he got injured, managed to get 55 points, and he was honestly a fairly consistent performer. And on top of that, he was getting good peripherals. He had 140 hits to go with it, 16 power play points, and then he threw in 2 hat tricks to boot. So he had a lot of, subcategories that he was contributing in. So if he didn't get injured, I have confidence that he would have finished the year with top marks all around from Carolina perspective.
Yeah, and just to touch on him super quick, his career shooting percentage is 11.5%. This year he was shooting 11.2. So he's right on pace for a sort of career average. His shots on goal per game, 3.2. He matched kind of what he did last season. So that peripheral coverage with Svechnikov is fantastic. Obviously, he didn't match the hits that he got last year, but he also played 14 less games than last year. Last year he played 78 games. So 7 less goals, but if you look at his point pace, he was pretty much right on par with last year, 0.88 points per game last year, 0.86 this year. Fantastic stuff. It's hard not to love Svechnikov, but my top fantasy performer for the Hurricanes was Martin Necas. And now this could have gone under biggest surprise, but I just felt that he was just so fantastic, just kind of across the board in 82 games, 28 goals, 43 assists for 71 points, averaged just about 18 and a half minutes time on ice per game, 3 minutes and 3 seconds of power play time on ice per game, 240 shots, 57 hits, and his shooting percentage, 11.7%. And over his career, he's averaged 12% every year. So again, right on par with the career shooting percentage. You love to see that, but the thing that really increased with Necas was his shots per game, 2.9 shots on goal per game. He had career highs across the board. As far as the rest of his career with shooting or shots on goal per game. My goodness. His next highest is 2.2 in 2020, 2021. So he really upped the ante there. Yeah, career high in hits, career high in shots. He blew that out of the water. His last career high was last year with 159 shots on goal per game. So he increased that by 81 shots, which is kind of crazy. So that's that full 2 shots a game to almost 3 shots a game. So fantastic stuff from Necas. Jacob, who surprised you the most out of Carolina this week?
I was going to go with Necas for my biggest surprise, but I was kind of in the same boat as you. But then I kind of was going through all the players, and by the end of it, I was like, you know what? There was another guy that kind of surprised me, and it was Brady Shea. By the end of it all, he ended up with 18 goals, and goal scoring from the blue line is always a valuable fantasy asset. You never really complain when you get that out of a blue liner. He did finish with 38 total points, so he was under, the half point a game mark, but 18 goals is still nothing to scoff at. His blocks and hits could have been higher. But at the end of the day, his fantasy value came from scoring from the back end this year. And I remember I picked him up a couple of different times because he had a couple of decent streaks and he was playing fairly well. So, I mean, he wasn't keep him on your roster all year type player, but he was a pick him up when he's hot type player, and he was a good fantasy asset randomly throughout the year. So I liked him.
100%. And his career high for points is 39 points. He got 38 this year, 39 points last year, 39 points in 2016-17 with the Rangers. His shots on goal per game, he doesn't get you a lot of shots, but he's averaged about 2 shots on goal per game his entire career. He used to hit a lot more, and now he doesn't quite hit so much. But time on ice, he's getting that time on ice. He's getting that 5-on-5 deployment. He got some power play time this year as he, gathered 7 power play points. But his shooting percentage, and this is like 18 goals this year, was fantastic. His career shooting percentage is 5.4%. This year he shot 9.6. Okay. And the highest he's ever shot in one of the seasons is 6.3. So is this repeatable?
Probably not.
Probably not.
But it was nice for this year.
Nice for this year, the goals at least, but he can get there with points. So if that like 30 to 40 point range is good for you in terms of like a 5 or 6 defenseman, like he's a decent depth option, especially if you need to just put somebody in just to get some games played to try and climb your way past your opponent. He's not a bad bet. So that's
a great pickup fill-in option.
100%. And now one guy who is kind of a fantastic option from the get-go and had the same number of goals is Brent Burns, who's my biggest surprise from the Hurricanes. In 82 games, yes, he played all 82, 18 goals, 43 assists for 61 points, 23 minutes and 13 seconds of average time on ice, 3 minutes of power play time on ice, 255 shots on goal, 40 hits, 7.1 shooting percentage, 6.7% over his entire career. That's fantastic right there. If you're within 1% or even 2% of your career, that's pretty repeatable, I would say. This year averaged over 3.1 shots on goal per game played. That's fantastic. And the 2 years previous, he was 2.5 shots, which again isn't anything to really scoff at, but you really love to get those players that are getting all those shots. The 3.1 shots on goal per game is fantastic. His hits have been steadily declining since his sort of prime, I guess you could say. His 2 75 and 76 point seasons. He had an 83 point season, not too long ago in 2018, 2019. He's usually good for goals, but he did have kind of a couple down years. He basically, like, since Erik Karlsson joined the Sharks. And I think just there's too many cooks in the kitchen. So, it was bound to happen that both of these elite players would have a bounce back year this year. And Burns was no exception. But the rate to which he bounced back was a bit surprising to me.
Yeah, Carolina is definitely raving in the streets for the value that they got out of Burns, and I, for one, as a Sharks fan, was very happy to see him bounce back, not just in goals, but in his overall performance. So it was nice from a fantasy and from a fan perspective.
Absolutely. And if you're a fan of the sport, it's hard not to get on board with my top fantasy performer for the next team we're going to talk about, the New Jersey Devils. And the top guy, we got to talk about Jack Hughes. I mean, it's tough not to talk about this guy with the season that he just had. He blew up this year. 78 games, 43 goals, 56 assists for 99 points. Average 19 minutes, 58 seconds of time on ice per game, 3 minutes and 10 seconds on the power play, 336 shots, 12 hits. He averaged 4.3 shots on goal per game. That is crazy. That is blowing up. 12.8% shooting on the year, 11.4 over his career. Again, there's that range. He's right in that nice little range. He doubled his shot total from last year. Now, the asterisk beside this will be that he played 29 more games this year than he did last year. That being said, he doubled his shot total from last year. That is insane. Okay. Jack Hughes, the more that the Devils get better, the more he's going to get better. And, he's still a young kid. Just going to look up his age real quick, right? He's 21 years old. Okay. Career highs, like across the board. Last year, he only had 26 goals, but he also only played 49 games. He hadn't played close to a full season yet. A couple of those seasons, like COVID seasons, so like they were shorter anyway. But his shots on goal per game has been going up each season. His rookie season was 2 shots. His second season was 2.5. Last year was 3.4 shots on goal per game. And then this year, 4.3. So he's really climbing up there, and 31 power play points. Okay. So that's something to also keep in mind. He's going to get you power play points, and that has extra value in certain leagues. So make sure that you pay attention to those sorts of things when you're grabbing your rosters for next year. Jacob, who is your top guy from New Jersey this year?
Yeah, nothing but top marks for Hughes. He's going to be a perennial 90-point player like forever. So if you can hold on to him in fantasy, hold on to him. For me, another player that performed super, super well, Dougie Hamilton. He's finally back to, being what he's supposed to, and that's the offensive style goal-scoring defenseman. He had 22 goals, 74 points, and he finished also with plus 23, and he was about a block. And he had about 1 block per game. So he had value finally from something other than just his offensive style. Playing on the Devils and the style that they played all year and how high-flying their offense was, he was a massive part of that. So normally he's the kind of player that's riddled with the injury bug. He played a full season, this year. So it was nice to see him actually be able to contribute fully from the back end and not have to have any sort of, asterisk or any, sort of knock on his game of, oh, he only played 50-something games. Oh, he was injured for, a couple of important games here and there. No, he played the whole thing, and he was dominant all year. And if you picked him towards the higher rounds, you definitely weren't disappointed. And for me, I know I reaped the rewards, and he changed my mind, and he's going to be one of my keepers going into next year personally.
Yeah, Dougie had a fantastic year. First time that he's broken that 20-goal mark. He has been good for goals over his career. He's cracked 10 goals for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This would have been his 8th season that he cracked 10 goals. You love to see that with your defenseman. Hitting that 10-goal mark is a good benchmark for someone that you can play on your fantasy teams. Now, my biggest surprise, who is someone I shouldn't have played as much, Andre Palat. And now he only played 49 games, so that kind of plays into this. The injuries that he had this year definitely hampered his season by a ton. Okay, 8 goals, 15 assists for 23 points, 15.5 minutes of time on ice per game, 1.5 minutes power play time on ice per game, 79 shots, 70 hits, 10.1% shooting percentage. His career, he's 11.9. And his career average of time on ice is 17 minutes. So he played 1.5 minutes less than he does on average over his entire career. And just a tough season for him. I mean, a lot of it is probably the injuries and those just kind of hampering him and just not having enough runway to really kind of get going. So hopefully, he's 32 years old. So I mean, hopefully, once the off season is done, however, it shakes out for the Devils this year, hopefully he can come back fully healthy and and play a full season. I mean, looking at his career, he's never played 82 games in a season. He played 81 games once. And that was his first full year. His first actual year, he only played 14 games. So it's tough. It's tough with somebody like Palat. I'd look at him as more of a depth guy. Hopefully he kind of rebounds to his sort of 40 to 50 points and, good peripherals. But his shots were down this year. His hits were down. Everything was down this year. So just be cautious with him. Maybe in the later rounds, take a flyer on him. But I wouldn't be picking them very high in any leagues for next year. Jacob, who surprised you?
Yeah, speaking of someone you should take flyers on a more positive note, I want to go talk about Dawson Mercer. He was definitely the biggest surprise from the Devils camp for me. He broke out and he had a bunch of different hot streaks. I remember we talked about him, I think, twice on our show throughout the year just because of how well he was doing at different points. And he finished the season with 27 goals, had a total of 56 points. And for someone who's a bit of a smaller player, he has some feistiness in his game. He still had 63 hits. It's not something you normally expect out of a player like that, but for someone that kind of grew from that third line into second line into even first line ice time, he's really, grown his game, and he's still young. He's still under that 23 age mark for, those young, growing, and developing stars that are on this Devils team. So there's still plenty of increased potential for him to be, even more of a breakout candidate for next year. So if you have the ability to take maybe a little bit more than a flyer on him, he's not going to be some high or middle round pick by next year, but towards the late middle portions of your draft, I think he might be worth grabbing, considering how well the Devils offense runs and considering how well he was functioning within that offense. So for next year, I think Mercer is a bit of a sneaky pick, and I think people should be keeping an eye on him.
Oh, for sure. He's definitely a sneaky pick. I mean, you talked about his size. Just looking at his profile right now, he's 6 feet and 180 pounds. So the size isn't too much of an issue, I think, there. 21 years old. So he's right in that, he's played basically 2 full seasons. He's played 82 games last year, 82 games this year. I don't know the last time a player started off their career with 2 full seasons like that. That is fantastic. So he got 56 points this year, only 42 last year. His shooting percentage went up this year, but he also shot more. He also took 7 more shots than last year. Okay. So hopefully that improves. His hits improved from last year. His power play points improved from last year, even though he averaged half a minute less on the power play. That's something to watch out for. If he gets prime power play deployment, I think just looking at his power play ice time right now, I'm guessing he's on the second unit.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done too much into it, but just looking at that ice time, that tells me he's on the second unit. If he heads up to that first unit, look out. Or if he just explodes 5-on-5, that's also a good indicator that he's going to have a great year. His time on ice, 2 seconds averaged more this year than last year, 16 minutes and 34 seconds on average this year. So he's right. He's looking really good right now. And in his career now, he has 164 games played, which is of note because several episodes ago, I talked about the breakout threshold. And with his size, he's average size. So with an average size player, you expect their breakout season or their breakout to be around that 200 games played mark. And now it doesn't really include playoffs, but he's in the playoffs right now. And next year, we could see an even bigger jump. Okay. He went from 42 points to 56 points, so next year, a breakout, they generally consider to be like a 25% increase. So like 56 points, you times that, by the 20. So he could be a 70-point player next year. Okay. So keep him on your radar, mostly for the points. We'll see how the shots and the peripherals play out. It looks like if anything is going to increase, it's probably going to be his shots. But again, look to see how he's going to be deployed next year with all of that. Jacob, let's talk some Rangers now. Who is your best fantasy performer on the Rangers?
It's a no-brainer for me. I got to go with the goalie, Igor Shesterkin. 37 wins. He only had 13 regulation losses, and he added 3 shutouts to go with that. And while his, goals against the save percentage weren't as good as last year, they were still, pretty darn good. So there's nothing to complain about in that aspect of his game either. If this was, a bunch of years ago where teams played their starters 65, 70 games, he'd be hitting that 40 win, maybe 45 win mark without, any problem or hesitation whatsoever. So the fact that he had 37 wins and he played under 60 games, that's just insanely impressive. And in my opinion, he's probably one of the top 3 fantasy goaltender options right now. So if you have him, hold him, or if you're looking to sell, you can sell supremely high because the Rangers aren't going anywhere. They're only getting better. And Shesterkin is still fairly young. He's an under 30 aged goaltender, so he has a lot of good stuff left in him, and he has a lot of prime years left to play. So Shesterkin for me is just the biggest backbone of that Rangers team, and he's the reason that they have so many good fantasy performers. So he is the best fantasy performer for me.
And guy who's always been the top dog for the Rangers for me, just because of the sheer coverage of categories, is Mika Zibanejad. Okay, 82 games played this year, 39 goals, 52 assists for 91 points, 39 power play points. Okay, fantastic right there. A shade under 20 minutes of time on ice per game, 3.5 minutes of power play time on ice per game, 251 shots on goal, 71 hits. He gives you everything. And he's playing center, so you're going to get those, those face-off win categories, all that sort of thing. But the category coverage is good for sure. 15.5 shooting percentage this year, 13.3 in his career. And he matched his career high in assists this year that he set last year. So that's fantastic to see. Zibanejad has always been a great performer for me. Jacob, who surprised you out of the Rangers this year?
The Rangers always have a lot of good fantasy performers, and that's why I have a bunch of them on my in my one league, and that includes Zibanejad. But one that I picked up a couple times throughout the year, and he was a good surprise, was Philip Chytil. He had 22 goals, 55 points, and he was, kind of that centerpiece of the quote unquote kid line that the Rangers had between him, Lafreniere, and Kakko for a while. They kind of got, separated and thrown in different places at a couple different points throughout the year. But in general, he was just a very good, consistent fantasy performer. And as the Rangers continue to get better and he continues to get more opportunities, he's only going to be producing more points. 20 goals is nothing to scoff at, and 55 points is nothing to complain about either from somebody who, predominantly was playing a third line role, especially down the stretch. So to me, he's another one of those sneaky picks in the later rounds that you can get for next year. And he's going to provide a lot of value on a very high value Rangers team.
100%. Another guy you can look at in the later rounds, depending on what your settings are in your league, Andre Miller. He surprised me a lot this year. In his 79 games, he had 9 goals, 34 assists for 43 points. Fantastic right there. 21 minutes and 57 seconds of time on ice per game, only 32 seconds of power play time on ice per game. So he really gets his value at 5-on-5. 113 shots, 162 hits, 8% shooting percentage, 7.6 over his career. He only had 20 points total last year. So he increased his goals, assists, hits, and shots from last year. You love to see that. Great pickup. If you picked up Miller and he's like your 5'6", you're probably doing pretty good. He's going to be solid. It looks like, he's not going to take the power play away from Fox anytime soon. It's great to have those 5-on-5 performers. Would it be nice to have somebody who's got some power play time and can get you those sort of categories or bonus points in point leagues? Sure. But for a 5-on-5 guy, he's fantastic. And jumping into the other New York team, the Islanders, my best fantasy performer from that team, I have to give it to Ilya Sorokin. I mean, he in 62 games, 31 wins, 22 losses, 7 overtime losses, 6 shutouts. Okay. 2.33 goals against average, 924 save percentage, a 69.4 quality start percentage, which is amazing. And then a 929 even strength save percentage. That's huge, because again, like we mentioned a couple episodes ago, the team spend most of their time at even strength. So you want your goaltender to just make those saves for you. Okay. So we're talking about the top 3 goalies in the league, or top 5. Sorokin should always be in that conversation. And he pretty much has been. He's always had good rate stats since he entered the league, even though he entered in sort of a tandem role. We saw that as soon as Varlamov started to kind of dip off in performance and get riddled with injuries, that Sorokin really stepped up. So, Jacob, who is the best player on the Islanders for you who really stepped up this year?
Yeah, so just real quick, Sorokin, top 3 fantasy goaltender, 100% agree on that. For me, best fantasy performer from the Islanders has got to be Brock Nelson. Great year out of him this year. 36 goals, 39 assists. He had 17 power play points. And on top of that, he had 8 game-winning goals. So he was playing a lot of big minutes. He was scoring a lot of big goals. He had a lot of big moments. And for an Islanders team that isn't really known for their offensive prowess, he still put up some really good offensive numbers. And that's something that provides you a lot of value from a team that is defensively oriented, because you're still going to get decent peripheral coverage out of those types of players. So Nelson, for me, was their best overall option, just from a pure offensive standpoint.
Yeah, Brock Nelson is fantastic. You gotta love him. He's back-to-back years of 30-plus goals. Can't really argue too much with that. My biggest surprise this year out of the Islanders, Matt Barzal, mostly because what could he have done with a full season? I mean, he was showing signs of rebounding. He only played 58 games, but he did really well in those 58 games. He had 14 goals, 37 assists for 51 points, 18 minutes and 43 seconds of time on ice per game, 3.5 minutes of power play time on ice per game, 139 shots, 25 hits, 10.1% shooting percentage, a career 11% shooting percentage. What could he have done with another 23 games? Right. Last year, was definitely a bit of a down year. He had 15 goals and 44 assists for 59 points in 73 games. So can he get back to that same rookie year, 20 goal, 80 point player? I think he can, with a full season, with Horvat in the mix, with everybody they got. He's definitely a bounce back candidate for next year. He's he's only 25, so he's just entering his prime. So let's hope that having, Bo Horvat there can kind of give him a boost. Most power play time on ice that he's had in his career. His rookie year, he averaged 3 minutes and 10 minutes on the power play. So, as the Islanders sort of lean into one power play unit, look for Barzal to rebound next year. Hopefully he breaks that 3 shots on goal per game plateau that he's kind of kept he's been hovering around 2.5 sort of his entire career. Let's see if he can sort of break through that with more power play time. Jacob, who is the biggest surprise for you for the Islanders?
Yeah, for me, it was a little tougher to find one because it was just a fairly normal season for most of the Islanders players. But one that kind of stood out to me was Zach Parise. Despite getting up there in age and his foot speed dropping a little bit, he's not the same type of player that he was when he was younger. He still gave some good offensive value for considering where he was. So he scored 21 goals and he had 34 points. So it wasn't like a huge fantasy impact, but it was a nice surprise comparative to what most people were probably expecting out of him, which was maybe like 12 to 15 goals and maybe like 30 points, because he wasn't playing a predominantly huge role on the Islanders, but he still was contributing here and there. And it was enough to, throw up 21 goals. 20 goal mark is something that's still good, no matter what age you are, no matter what position you play. It's just a good number to hit. And whether you picked him up for a day or you had him on your roster for an extended period of time, it was probably a nice surprise when the Islanders were playing and going, oh, Parise scored. That's great. So to me, he was a fun little surprise considering the average season that the Islanders had.
Absolutely. Next team we're going to talk about, Pittsburgh Penguins. Jacob, who is the best player on the Penguins this year?
Well, the simple answer is Sidney Crosby, because that's just what the answer is. It's Sidney Crosby at the end of the day. He had 93 points, 33 goals, 27 power play points. It doesn't matter that he's getting up there in age at this point. It doesn't seem to be affecting him in any way, shape, or form, because he's still performing up to the level that he's expected to. He's a face-off machine. He eats big minutes at all times. He's playing every situation. So if you are able to have Crosby and people are starting to undervalue him because of his age, take advantage of that as soon as you can, because he's not dropping off to the extent that some probably would assume that he would. Not just yet.
100%. And my biggest fantasy performer from the Penguins this year is Rickard Rakell. I mean, he played 82 games this year, which I don't know the last time he played 82 games. Like, he just seems to get injured just all the time. 28 goals, 32 assists for 60 points, solid production, 18 minutes and 26 seconds of time on ice per game, 3 minutes and 18 seconds of power play time on ice per game. I'm seeing a trend here, folks. 244 shots on goal per game, 141 hits, 21 power play points, 11.5 shooting percentage this year, 11.2 over his career. So he's right in his wheelhouse. He's in his prime, or just at the end. Like, Rickard Rakell has always been good for shots and hits, and he was healthy this whole year and, got the benefit of the points. The line of him, Zucker, and Malkin towards the end of the season was just fantastic as they pushed for a playoff position, but it wasn't enough this year, sadly, for Pittsburgh fans. What's your biggest surprise from Pittsburgh this year, Jacob?
Yeah, this one was a bit of a disappointment for me, and it's going to be Brian Rust. Over the past handful of years, he's been one of the best value fantasy performers because he was sitting at or close to about a point a game. and he hasn't really played a full season. He back in 2019-20, he played 55 games. 2020-21, he played 56 games, and then last year, before this year, he played 60 games, and he was just putting up almost a point a game to that point. And this year, he played 81 games, just under that full season mark, and he only had 20 goals, 46 points, and he was a -4. His shooting percentage is down. It was only 9.5%. So just overall, he went from being one of the best value performers to just being a guy again. So picking him up and holding on to him was just not an option this year.
Yeah. My biggest surprise out of Pittsburgh this year, Tristan Jarry, didn't quite live up to the expectations, didn't really give you great rate stats. 47 games, only 24 wins, 2 shutouts, 2.9 goals against average, 909 save percentage. He's got a 914 career save percentage, 55.3 quality start percentage, and 915 even strength save percentage. So those are all numbers that are a bit lower than you would like to see in sort of all those categories. Hopefully he can have a bounce back year next year. Moving right along to Washington, hopefully they as a team can have a bounce back year. And my best performer from that team, I'm not going to go for the low hanging fruit. I'll save that for my co-host, but Dylan Strome. Okay, he also could have been biggest surprise as far as Washington goes, but he really cashed in on this opportunity that he was given in the top 6. 81 games, 23 goals, 42 assists for 65 points, career highs, 21 power play points, 16 minutes and 41 seconds of time on ice per game, 3 minutes of power play time on ice per game. That's the key right there. 154 shots, 20 hits. Hopefully he shoots more next year. Hopefully he hits more. 14.9 shooting percentage this year. 14.3 career shooting percentage. Boom, right there. What he did was sustainable. You give a guy good players to play with. You give him the time on ice. You give him the power play time on ice. He produces. What a shock. What a shock. Career highs in goals, assists, and shots. Strome, fantastic. Jacob, who's the best fantasy performer in Washington?
Yeah, just quick on Strome. I picked him up, had him in both of my leagues this year. He was just a great value asset, another sneaky player for, going into next year as far as value goes. Now, best player, it's like you said, it's the low hanging fruit. It's Alex Ovechkin. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that for me. He still scored 42 goals, despite being up there in age. He's coming up on that, high 30s number, almost 40 years old. He's getting there. He's still got it. He threw 188 hits this year. He was under a point a game, which, that just mostly accounts for the fact that the Capitals were just not overly fantastic this year. And that's kind of why they missed the playoffs. But he was still doing what he does, scoring goals, putting up points, throwing hits, and being the player that he is. So if you have Ovechkin, you're not going to be disappointed. That's just the long and short of it there.
I think that's the very short of it. Biggest surprise for me out of Washington this year, kind of a pleasant surprise, sort of the opposite of rust in a way, where we saw a bit of a bounce back from TJ Oshie. Okay. Last year was just career lows in pretty much everything. In 58 games this year, he had 19 goals, 16 assists for 35 points. Doesn't seem like a lot. But again, if you're going to take a flyer on somebody, Oshie, you could do worse than Oshie. 16 minutes and 43 seconds of time on ice per game, 3 minutes and 9 seconds of power play time on ice per game, 126 shots, 125 hits, 15.1 shooting percentage, 14.7 career shooting percentage. So you see it right there. His shots went up. He was getting the power play time on ice, which when you're in Washington, you're going to get more points. right? Just like, when you're in Edmonton, you're going to get those points. Just nice to see the bounce back year from Oshie, because like last year he got like 25 points or something like that. It was not a great year. Jacob, who was the big surprise out of Washington for you?
Yeah, this one was a big disappointment candidate for me, and that's Evgeny Kuznetsov. He only managed 12 goals this year, and he finished at a -26, so his possession game was not fantastic. Normally, he's a goal scorer. This year, he was more of an assist machine. He had over 40 assists, but he just provided little fantasy value overall. He wasn't really throwing hits. He wasn't blocking shots. He wasn't scoring. He wasn't contributing on the power play. There just wasn't much going on with his game this year. So, it was just a flat season for him in general. I think he's one of the best candidates for a bounce back season next year, whether that's him playing in Washington or somewhere else. Not sure if they're going to move on from him, if there's any, changes coming to Washington after their season. But, I think he normally provides good fantasy value. This year, he just didn't have it.
100%. Moving right along to Philadelphia. As a team, they didn't really have it this year, didn't make the playoffs. But who was the best performer out of Philly for you, Jacob?
No question for me, and that's going to be Kerney. 31 goals, 61 points, and he was just a good, well-rounded player for the Flyers. Whenever he's in the lineup, he's their best player. He's the one driving everything on the ice. He's the one that's really keeping them in a lot of games. He had 15 power play points, but he also had 6 shorthanded points. And I'm not sure how many leagues really count shorthanded points, but the ones that do normally have good value coming out of, special teams like that. So a player that can contribute shorthanded as well as on the power play and even strength, that's a good sneaky option for a high-end player.
100%. And for me, this guy, he could have been the biggest surprise, but I didn't want to take Kerney for best. So Owen Tippett, for me, fantastic. I had him on my team, and he just produced throughout the entire season. 77 games played, 27 goals, 22 assists for 49 points, 12 power play points. So not that far behind from Kerney. 17 minutes and 26 seconds of time on ice, 2 minutes and 21 seconds of power play time on ice, 231 shots on goal, 125 hits. He gave you the category coverage. Okay. 3 shots on goal per game for the year. His career high of shots on goal per game, 2.4 in his rookie season, 7 games. Last year and the year before, 2 shots on goal per game across the year. Last year, only 21 points. He more than doubled that this year. And as far as breakout goes, he's 6'1", 207. So he's that average size player. He's 24 years old. So he's just getting into like his prime, and he's at 192 games played over his entire career. So I mean, I think it's almost safe to say that this year was his breakout year. But you take a look at those 49 points, and he could potentially hit 60 plus next year. Okay, I wouldn't be surprised if he hits 60 plus. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 30 goals. Sky's the limit. Philly, they can only get better. We'll see if that happens, though. But Tippett was just fantastic. 11.7 shooting percentage this year, 9.8 over his career. Again, he's still in that sort of 2% variance. Is he gonna get that? Is he gonna have that high of a shooting percentage next year? Snipers generally live in that 12 to 15%. So we'll see kind of how he does next year, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 60 plus. Jacob, who surprised you the most out of the Flyers this year?
Yeah, I was initially going to say Tippett because I was really glad to see him break out. And I've always been a fan of his since he got drafted back in 2017. But somebody that continues to surprise me, Tony DeAngelo. I mean, despite the Flyers not having a great overall season, he still did. He had 11 goals, 42 points. He had decent, well-rounded numbers despite the team around him not really doing much. And he's normally just a one-way threat, but he put up some decent peripherals throughout the year, got a good amount of shots, and was a good primary scoring threat. So I'm not sure if he has a long-term future on the Flyers, but it doesn't seem to matter where D'Angelo goes. He continues to score points. He continues to produce. So I don't know why I'm still surprised at this point, but I was surprised to see that he just still did it on a not great team.
Absolutely. D'Angelo, he is going to produce. We'll see what happens with Tortorella in Philadelphia. You know, if he's still going to be the coach next year, who knows what's going to happen with the team. But for me, my biggest surprise is Scott Laughton. I was kind of impressed at how much he got on the score sheet this year. 18 goals, which is a career high for him, 25 assists, also a career high for him, 43 points, career high. But he gave you peripheral coverage this year, 170 shots, 156 hits, 57 blocks. So a good depth option or somebody to consider if you're in a category league. He had the most time on ice of his career this year with 18 minutes and 17 seconds. Last year was 16 minutes and 26 seconds. So, if the Flyers get more skilled players on their team, I would not expect him to reach that same time on ice per game. But definitely, if you're looking at somebody to give you some peripherals in the sort of bottom sections of your league, you can turn to Scott Laughton. Turning to our last team, the Columbus Blue Jackets. They're in the Bedard sweepstakes. We'll see if they get Bedard or who they kind of eventually go with. But for me, the best fantasy performer, hands down, was Boone Jenner. Okay. In 68 games played, 26 goals, 19 assists for 45 points. It's not a lot of points, but that's not the main reason to get Jenner. He's usually really good in the face-off dot. He got 20 minutes and 12 seconds of time on ice per game, 3 minutes and 5 seconds of power play time on ice per game. And that is going to translate to more points on the power play as the Blue Jackets figure themselves out. They presently don't have a coach. We'll see what happens with their coaching. Who's going to come back next year? I think a great fit would be somebody like Bruce Boudreau. And if that's the case, I would expect, their top guys to get more points next year. Okay. So keep your eyes on Columbus as they head into this draft in this offseason. If they get somebody like Boudreau coaching, if they pick up, Bedard or Fantilli, I would expect them to be on the top power play. Expect a bounce back year from Johnny Hockey. Boone Jenner, his points will probably go up. But Jenner, he gets you the peripheral coverage, 214 shots on goal, 129 hits, 12.1 shooting percentage this year, 10.4 over his career. Great category coverage. And it's tough not to cheer for a guy like Boone. His shots on goal, 3.1 shots on goal per game this year. And he's been close to that at a couple points in his career, has never really eclipsed it until now. Great fantasy asset, especially for category leagues. Jacob, who's the best guy out of Columbus for you?
Yeah, Boone Jenner's always been an underrated fantasy performer, if you ask me, and I think you hit the nail right on the head. But for the sake of discussing another player that just had a good offensive season, I'll throw Johnny Hockey into the discussion. He still had 74 points. He was still the point/assist machine that he usually is. He doesn't really give you anything beyond shots and assists and points. He doesn't throw hits ever. He doesn't block shots ever. He doesn't really do much beyond the offensive side of the game, but he still did that. So if you had him on your roster and he was just, a depth option on a day where the Blue Jackets were playing and nobody else was, he was somebody that you could still get a couple of points out of here and there. And there wasn't much of a problem having him in the lineup. So I think for discussion, I think he was another good, solid fantasy option.
He most definitely was a good, solid fantasy option. But one guy who's my biggest surprise, who was not a good fantasy option whatsoever this year. And I hate to say it.
Probably the worst.
Probably the worst goaltender in the league. You probably know where this is going. Elvis Merzlikins. I don't know what happened this year. I have no idea what happened this year. 4.23 goals against average, 876 save percentage, 23.3 quality start percentage. Yikes. In every way, yikes. I mean, he did have a personal tragedy in his family this year. So obviously, mentally, he probably just wasn't in the game at all. But just not a great year for him at all. But hopefully, for his sake, he can kind of have a bounce back year next year. Just a tough year overall. And I don't know what else to say about Elvis. I mean, he's generally been pretty decent in his career. Usually not like amazing rate stats, but he generally does good enough to get you something. And like his even strength save percentage this year was also bad. 879, which is just not great. He's been like serviceable the past couple of years with 914, 916. His rookie year, 927. He did strength save percentage. That's fantastic. But the quality start percentage, like you at least like to see like 50%, but yeah, he just wasn't with it this year. Jacob, who's the biggest surprise?
Yeah, I feel bad for Elvis because he's not a bad goaltender, but this year there was just nothing to write home about. As far as surprise goes, I'm not trying to pick on anybody here, but I'm gonna pick a little bit on one of the rookie players, and it's gonna be Kent Johnson. He had a lot of hype coming into this year, and unfortunately, he just didn't quite live up to it. He still had a decent year. Still had 16 goals, finished with 39 points. And he played some big minutes down the stretch, but he didn't really do much with it. He was shooting pretty well. He was averaging about 3 shots a game for his last 10 games of the season. So, he was picking up some of the peripherals, but he wasn't really throwing hits. He wasn't really scoring any goals. He wasn't really getting any points. So he might be a fun little breakout candidate for next year if he continues to, kind of grow and maybe bulk up and adapt his game towards the West Coast style, and and adapt his game to the style that needs to be played for the NHL these days, because he has the speed already, he has the hands, he has the creativity, and I think he has the good potential to be a great fantasy option in Columbus as one of their top 2 centers. So while it wasn't fantastic this year, I think he has high potential to surprise us for next year.
Absolutely. I mean, he's only 20 years old. Only 11 power play points this year. Only a minute 46 on the power play this year. Again, this is a guy who you're looking at this team, and like I said, if Bruce Boudreau becomes the coach for Columbus, I mean, I'm only throwing this name out because he just seems like a great fit. I haven't heard any rumors. I haven't heard anything like that. I'm not here to stir the pot.
Nope.
I'm just here to say that he would be a fantastic fit with this team. And you could see guys like Kent and Goudreau and Laine, guys like that really kind of elevate their game under a coach who will utilize their talents. Brad Larson wasn't the best coach. Let's be honest here. If he gets that power play time on ice, look for him to break out. Only 1.6 shots on goal per game, only 15 hits. Everything, he can only get better, okay? He almost got 20 goals we could call him a rookie because he only played 9 games last year when he signed his ELC out of, playing in the States. 175 pounds, 6 feet. So he could, like Jacob was saying, kind of bulk up a little bit, get stronger. That's probably going to be a lot of his focus in the offseason here. So let's just hope that Columbus finally gets a good coach who will utilize the team in an offensive way. And look out for them next year. I think they're going to push. They're going to push for a playoff spot this next year. Just look out for them next year.
Big super early call there.
Big super early call. But that is all the time that we have for today. Next week, we're going to dive into the Central Division. So stay tuned for that discussion. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at THW Fantasy. I'm on Twitter at Caleb Scouting.
And I'm also on Twitter at Strozyk67.
And if you are watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the Hockey Writers YouTube channel. If you are listening in podcast format, subscribe to the podcast and please leave us a review on whatever platform you listen to. You've been listening to the Hockey Writers Fantasy Forecheck. Keep your stick on the ice, get pucks in deep, and give it 110%, eh? I'll see you next week.